We're on another episode here of Athlete POV. We're sitting down with Brad Yaffe, quarterback, University of Oregon. Excited to have him on. Excited to hear what he has to say. He just graduated. He's now at a real job, life after sports. So we're excited to see what's going on in his life. And what's going on, Brad?
How's it going? Happy to be here.
Of course, of course. So one thing I found that was really interesting in high school, going back to high school, I know 4 or 5 years ago, you're a
Yeah.
two sport athlete, football, lacrosse. You run like a lacrosse state championship. That was probably pretty cool.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
So, strangely enough, I would say that growing up, baseball was always kind of my number one sport.
Hmm.
But then I got to high school. I played my freshman year of baseball, and I wasn't really a fan of the program. Um, I loved all my teammates and everything, and the coaches were fine. But honestly, I think I experienced like burnout with baseball. And I feel like that's kind of a pretty common experience in that
Hmm.
sport for a lot of kids, especially kids that go on to play other sports. They loved baseball, but then they hit a point and they just kind of give it up. So then I always loved football, and I played football 4 years. But then my sophomore year, I played lacrosse, and unfortunately, I missed most of the season of lacrosse because I had a couple knee surgeries. So I
Hmm.
really only played lacrosse my junior senior year, and but that was a blast. We played a bunch of teams from all over the country, all over the state, and Coach Fratelli, he coached this other team, like the advanced program. I don't know if you ever heard of that, um, but he's kind of like the kingpin of Bay Area lacrosse, I would say. So he was the man.
Hmm. Very interesting. I'm sure going through all different sports. I mean, I actually played baseball and football in high school as well. Same situation as you. I played baseball my freshman year and then stopped afterwards to focus on football. But
Yeah.
obviously, me being um, a 5'10", 180 kid, linebackers, that's not what a linebacker looks like in college. So I went down the more social media business route. But for you,
Got it.
4 years at Oregon, it has to feel amazing to graduate from Oregon, such a star-studded program like that with all the opportunity ahead of you. You mentioned earlier that you got a job in the WWE back in Connecticut, where you are now. So that's really,
Yeah.
very interesting. Tell us about the transition from uh, just your schedule as an athlete, everyday training, film, all that kind of stuff, to now. I guess a sense of maturing into a field that you can see yourself in for really a more extended amount of time.
Yeah, you're right. So like for the foreseeable future, I mean, I would say, obviously when you're at Oregon or any college sport, you're gonna have your DFO and you're gonna have your coaches always be checking up on you to make sure you're doing the right thing. You're gonna have a laundry list of different people in positions of power to make sure that they're taking care of the student athlete, because the student athlete is the revenue engine that essentially like supplies those jobs, right? And so it's a big circle. And I loved every single person on staff at Oregon, especially like the people who weren't the coaches. The people who filled in the medical staff, the training staff, cafeteria workers,
Hmm.
the JQuil staff. They were the absolute best. So um, just having them surrounding you and making sure that those were your supports was fantastic. And I think that I honestly wouldn't be here today if I didn't have them, because even though they were support kids, maybe sometimes a little too much, and
Hmm.
sometimes kids rely on them too much. I think that my personal, uh, reaction to how they helped me actually helped me become more independent.
Hmm.
So then when I came to Connecticut and after I finished school, um, I was luckily pretty set up to understand how to operate on my own.
Very well. And then I saw how you were redshirt too that first year at Oregon, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't by no stretch was I a star stud by any in college football by any measure, but so I came to Oregon and I was completely culture shocked, right? So I was the only kid from my high school that even attempted to go on to play college ball at all. So I came from a really small school. We weren't really that good at all, but um, come to Oregon, and all of a sudden I'm in a room with Justin Herbert and for 2 years, and so he's obviously like the man right now in the league, right? So coming to a room with him and being surrounded by not only him but you know 20 other future NFL players on that roster in 2018. Um, that that was really something special.
Absolutely. And I watched this interview with Kayvon, uh, NFL draft pick, probably going in the top 5, top 10, right? And he was like, when he was talking about his recruiting process, he said how Oregon was like my 40-year decision because he picked Oregon over other big schools, like Alabama, Georgia, because he said Oregon could fulfill where he wanted to be after football, or if football doesn't work out, which obviously is always a possibility to everybody. Can you go in more of like what Oregon is for like the future after football, like you mentioned with Nike and Phil Knight, how he
Yeah.
could walk into his office and say, "Hey, could I start out here at Nike?" And he would be like, "Yeah, sure." Just like those connections.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you come to Oregon and you almost immediately associate Nike with the school, and it doesn't take you long to figure out that. I mean, actually, one of the greatest things and one of the first things you'll notice about if you come to the University of Oregon is that people wear Oregon sweatshirts like this and uh, their actual Nike gear around campus all the time, and so it's just immediately special as soon as you get there. But so for Kayvon, I have to give props to him. He's a super smart guy, and I think that he um, probably did make this decision based off like a 40-year plan in his head. But I would say that you know nothing is going to be given to you at all as you come to the University of Oregon. Obviously, you're going to be put in positions where you can make the most of it. And so I think that sometimes it's a misconception that just because you go to Oregon, you're going to be completely set up, and that's just not the case.
Right.
Obviously, I hope all my teammates do well, and I hope they do make it. And obviously, Nike will be a big support system for a lot of those guys moving forward. But unless you actually put in the work and effort, uh,
Right. I think
you're not.
what Kayvon was talking about was just how he's already put in the work and how he's already set himself up. I think that's what he was trying to say when he was talking.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, Kayvon. I mean, with Nike, I'm not really sure about the his relationship with them specifically, but you know, Nike. So one of the programs we have for the student athletes is the mentorship program. So I signed up for it my sophomore or junior year, I forget, and I got paired up with a guy named Kelly Hibbler, and he was my mentor as I went through college for the past couple of years. And him and I still text from time to time, but he's in Nike Swim, and he was worked around Nike for countless years. And so just having those connections, access to those types of connections, um, for a guy like me who's definitely in a different position than Kayvon, was pretty huge.
Absolutely. And I'm sure ultimately it's the right decision for you that Oregon will pay off. Another
Yeah,
thing that I thought was really cool and is very actually probably rare in high school athletes was when you were in high school, you went to the opening, which was like a college camp, right?
yeah.
Talk about that because I know it's very rare and everyone sees it through the media, through all sports media platforms. What was that like and what was your experience there?
I mean, my experience was probably the same as most kids who come from a small school, which is you look at these kids who are 4-star, 5-star athletes with 30 plus offers, and you realize, well, there's really not actually that much of a difference in skill level between a guy who is a 3-star versus a guy who's a 4-star. Really, the biggest difference, honestly, is just literally physical development for the most part. And so I went there, and I luckily had a really good day. Um, so I had two coaches who were kind of working the staff there. It was a guy named Sione and a guy named Adam Tefralis. And so they were both working there that day. And it came down to the end of the day, and they were going to award camp MVP. And I was I was up for it, and so was this other kid. I think his name's Cade. I think it was Cade McNamara. He was there, and so
Oh,
he ended up winning it. But then so Adam and Sione came up to me, and they're like, "Yeah, you would have won it if it wasn't for this one drill where you messed up one time." And like he said, all the coaches voted for you except for this one coach. We had to have a like unanimous decision. So you know, would things have changed in my recruiting path if that would have happened? I don't know, but either way, I'm happy where I am now. and obviously Cade McNamara is a beast, and so,
At
but the
Michigan.
the opening
Right,
is
yeah.
pretty cool event. I recommend.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it's pretty cool to go there. Now, what your recruiting process? Was Oregon always like the number one choice for you, or were there other schools in the mix, or did being from California play a part of going to Oregon? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, being from the Bay Area, I definitely knew a couple people who went to Oregon, so I knew it wasn't like a school where if I went there, I'd feel lost at all. Um, my mom went to USC growing up, so I was kind of a USC fan, always growing up. And obviously, I grew up like 5 minutes from Stanford, so I was a little bit of a Stanford fan as well. Um, but then when it came down to, I guess, crunch time, like into senior year where you got to pick a school, I visited Oregon, saw the facilities, saw the coaches, saw a couple of my teammates, and I just thought, there's probably no better place for me because I've always been under the mentality that water always finds its level, and that even if you come in as a walk on or if you come in as a 5 star, um, you'll be exposed for who you are, whether that's for the better or for the worst. So um, I just wanted to be in the best position possible.
Definitely. And nobody just gets to where you are without like pure luck. Obviously, lot of training, hard work, a lot of decisions you've made played a role to where you are today and things you've done in the past. What would you say would be one of the or a couple of the key training things that you've done that's like a non-negotiable for you in the weight room, on the field, when you're training?
Um, that's tough. I would say so. Quarterback's a really different position than most other football positions, right? Because you don't necessarily have to be like benching 300 pounds, right?
Very true.
And you don't have to be squatting 400 pounds or whatever. Um, so I would say for quarterback alone, I think the most important thing is honestly just flexibility as well as making sure that you don't go literally when you're in high school, don't go like a week without throwing. Whether even if you're playing basketball and baseball or lacrosse, just always be throwing a ball at least a couple times a week, just so you always are never rusty.
Yeah, I definitely feel quarterbacks definitely different than say a defensive lineman or something. Because quarterbacks, you gotta control everything. I feel like it's a lot of mental stuff too. Is there
Yeah.
like, all right, let me ask you this question. I probably do know the answer, but at Oregon, when you're watching film, right,
Yeah.
and you always got to be ready, no matter if you're the starter or like you're the last guy, right? How often and how long would you say you watched film every week on the next opponent?
On my own or in team meetings.
Let's just go in total, everything.
Well, you're required to be in these team meetings. So I would say the way Oregon had it set up is like an average practice week would be get there at like 7, eat breakfast 7 to 8. This is under Cristobal's regime. I don't know how it is now with Lanning, but get there, have breakfast 7 to 8, be in the meeting room at like 8:15, and then be in the meeting for an hour going over opponent scout, and then going over film from last week and uh, practice film, and so it's a little bit of everything, and then get out in the field, and then you walk through it for an hour, and then you eventually stretch and warm up. And practice really isn't even that long, to be honest. At college football, that was kind of a shock to me.
Mm.
And then throughout practice as well, you have walkthrough periods where you are essentially going over things slowly as well. And then you go to class. Practice would end at like 12. You go to class, and they'd say be back here at like 5 something, and then you'd have another hour meeting at night. So it'd be at least, I don't know, 3 hours a day where you're just simply working on solely the mental side of football. So
That's very interesting because I know not a lot of. Well, I'm sure every sport watches film, but quarterback specifically, I feel like because you control everything is the biggest, one of the biggest factors to play the position. You know.
yeah. So I mean, some guys need film a lot more than other guys. I think me personally, I learn better through just actual repetition. So if we were to go out and practice uh, a play that we install, I think I'd memorize it better and learn it better actually being on the field and watching it, or actually doing it myself than just watching it on the screen. And but for some guys, So obviously some guys have a tough time doing both. I've been in a quarterback room where there's been guys who just have had extreme trouble learning the playbook, and it hasn't. I mean, the portal's there for a reason, right? So yeah, that's about it.
I got you, man. That's pretty cool to hear from someone that's been in a quarterback room with someone as big as Justin Herbert in the football world. So now, last thing we like to always like talk about on Athletic Minds, this athlete POV podcast is we like to hit on athletes' mental health because it's something that doesn't get talked about enough in society today with stereotypes and just being a football player, or any athlete. What would you say would be some advice to someone going through a hard time from you?
Someone going through a hard time, you know, I would say, you know, in the football world, fo- football is going to be tough. I'm imagining in my head someone who plays football and is going through a tough time. So I'm going to speak to that situation. Football is going to be one of those sports where you are going to play up till you're 21, 22, 23-ish years old, right? For the 90% of football players out there who make it to the college level. And so I know how tough it is waking up at 6:30 in the off season and doing these lifts and runs, and then having coaches, text you to do things which you think maybe small things that don't matter, but and over time it can wear you down. But just know that I think the most important thing is if you can somehow find a support system around you. For me, I would say my support system was definitely my close group of teammates, um, and my friendships that I made on the team. So that was always something that you know I I relied on if I ever was in a mood where I didn't feel super pumped to go to football. So just find your support system and invest in them, because you never know if you're going to have one of those days where you really just don't want to get out of bed. Sorry, there's a little horn in the background, but just yeah, find your support system and invest in them. So I would say that's probably the most important thing.
Absolutely, you gotta always have people around you that motivate you, keep you on the path. That's super important.